Good day, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our online series, PNU Talks. I am Jose Marie M. Calamlam. You can call me Jomar. And I am your learning homebody in this episode. I am an alumnus of PNU Batch 2013, BS Mathematics for Teachers. I also finished my master's degree in the same university last 2018. I am currently a senior high school teacher where I implemented blended learning. I conducted researches on blended learning and shared my knowledge on the topic on conferences and seminars. I hope my expertise could help you. Today, we are going to discuss reimagining teaching and learning in the context of VUCA environment. What is VUCA? According to Benet and Lemoyne, VUCA is short for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. To make it simple, I believe we can refer to it as ano na ba ang nagyayari sa mundo? In education, studies usually refer VUCA to the changing trends in the educational environment. These changes include, but not limited to, the rise of online technology in education such as MOOCs, the emergence of new skill sets, the 21st century skills, and the change in qualification to some leading companies. Somehow they no longer consider college degrees as an entry requirement. Due to the changing environment, educational institutions suggested modifications in the traditional approach. Hence, several historically distinct educational approaches are combined. It is commonly known as blended learning. Blended learning is defined either a combination or a shift in educational approaches, technologies, and methodologies. But regardless of the definition, existing literatures suggest that it is the balance between various aspects of instruction as long as it is for the betterment of teaching learning processes. The purpose of blended learning is to compensate with the distinct weaknesses of each approach. Note that blended learning is not only limited to combination of traditional and e-learning. However, given the current availability and popularity of technology, blended learning is more aligned in maximizing our capability to use e-learning. More or less, blended learning is seen as a response to this VUCA challenge. The pandemic reached the Philippines, and the next ECQ has been implemented by the mid of March, and this drastically changed our educational environment. Now, are we facing a different VUCA environment? I think yes, we do. First, we are suddenly forced to a new normal because of necessary ECQ. Educational institutions need to decide on implementing distance learning or just cut the school year. Second, we are not sure when we can go back to normal. We don't know when will ECQ and GCQ end. Hence, we need flexibility on the educational approach we are going to implement at the start of the next school year. Third, there are a lot of factors we need to consider before implementing an educational approach. We need to consider the skills of the teachers, the resources available to students, the status of an area, and several more. And this actually gives some educational institutions a difficult time in deciding on the next steps to move forward. And lastly, given several factors stated earlier, most of them are unknown or ever-changing. My point here is that we are facing a VUCA environment different from what existing studies presented. The context of blended learning as the combination of face-to-face and online learning is supposedly our response to a VUCA environment traced by changes in technology and needed skills. However, the blended learning we know is no longer applicable in the VUCA environment traced by the pandemic, especially in areas where it is impossible to conduct classes in schools. It gave us a condition that face-to-face sessions will no longer be possible. Hence, it is necessary for us to learn on how we can relay instruction through complete online means. The current situation limits us to use online means in implementing distance learning. This type of situation is where we are challenged to reimagine teaching and learning, hence to develop self-paced out-of-class activities. My thesis on assessing blended learning has led me to come up with 9 components. But given our current situation, we are going to focus on 2: self-paced learning and out-of-class activities. By definition, self-paced learning refers to individual work, while out-of-class activities refers to homework. It is understandable why focus on out-of-class activities. But the question is, why are we focused on self-paced learning? Although live online lectures are possible through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Discord, Skype, and any other applications, there are reasons why self-paced activities are essential in this time. First is the issue on technical side of online learning. Live online lectures are extremely reliant to the quality of internet connection. It will require a fast and reliable connection, a condition not always available to both teachers and students. Based on my experience, ensuring everyone has joined a certain online activity is taxing given that we are doing it inside the classroom. What's more if we are doing it outside the classroom? Second is the challenge of adjusting to students' individual pacing. Lecture method is proven not effective in this aspect. That is why differentiation and personalization of learning is highly encouraged. A live online lecture would lead to the same problem to an in-class lecture. During a lecture inside the classroom, we can't help that some students tend to not follow the discussion due to various reasons. Fortunately, we can control that if we are inside the classroom. However, it is a different scenario outside the classroom. Limitations of live online lectures on technical issues and student pacing leads to the necessity of implementing self-paced learning. Shifting from live online lectures to self-paced learning deviates us teachers to the challenges of having unreliable internet connection. Self-paced learning simply requires internet connection which may not be of highest quality. Furthermore, self-paced activities being designed to be accomplished individually gives students an option to adjust the pacing of instruction. The third but not the least reason to use self-paced activities are the skill that could be developed in implementing them. Initiative and self-direction are considered essential life skills in the 21st century. Self-paced learning, by its nature, encourages independence in the learning concepts. Students who are conditioned to learn and work independently tend to take responsibility on their own learning. Developing a quality self-paced out-of-class activities requires a number of indicators. My thesis on assessment of blended learning led me to these 10 indicators. Here are the indicators. In each indicator, well, I will use my own online activities as examples. Our first indicator is an online activity should present activities and easy to follow instructions. So to present that indicator, we're going to use my online activities for circles as an example. So let's go first with homework number 1, basics of circles. So for homework number 1, well, this is an example of an online activity that is both self-paced and out-of-class activity. So as you can see, we have here first a content, a video, and then after that, we have here the website. Okay, so those are the two contents that after they check on those two content, they're going to answer this formative assessment. So actually this activity is somewhat simple, and then now let's take a look at the instructions. So an introduction will include first the objective. So what are the students expected to do or to learn after the activity, and then after that we give them instructions. So the instructions is somewhat simple because again the task is also simple. They're just going to watch a video or see an attached link and then they're going to answer a homework. So more or less we just replace the lecture with a video, and then once they know what they're supposed to do, they're going to answer a homework. So that those type of activities, well, it will just require simple instructions. However, the comprehensiveness of an instruction is based to the complexity of the task. So let's go to an example in which we are required to have a more complex instruction. So in this case, we have here the objective. So the objective here is somewhat more complicated because instead of just watching a video and then answering an activity, they are expected to derive a conclusion. Okay, so since it will require, let's say, a higher order thinking skill because it is already deriving and concluding, then we're going to have a more comprehensive instruction. So as you can see in the instruction, first is there are given points and they circle, and then they're going to form angles, and then they're going to measure the angles. After that, they're going to analyze the measurements by answering the follow-up questions. So this is an example of a more comprehensive instruction. So as you can see here, here are now the follow-up questions. So the follow-up questions, actually it will lead you to the conclusion that this activity aims to develop, which is about the relationship between the inscribed angle and the arc that they intersect. The second indicator is an online activity should create and or collect contents that are relevant in achieving lesson objectives. Okay, so to present that indicator, we're going to use my online activity for quadratic functions as an example. Okay, so our lesson 1 is Introduction to Quadratic Functions, and this lesson will include 3 objectives. So first is identify quadratic function, second is graph a quadratic function, and then third is participate actively in class discussion. So let's focus on the first 2 objectives. So given our indicator, our first objective is identify quadratic function. So we must have a content that will identify quadratic function. And then the second one is, well, we need a content that will discuss on how are we going to graph quadratic functions. So here are the start of the content. So we're going to start first with the definition. So we already covered the first objective, which is to identify quadratic function. Now let's go to the next content, and then in this next content is, well, it gives us an example on how to graph a quadratic function, and it is done step by step. So that is the main essence of the second indicator, in which content must be, well, directly relevant to the lesson objectives. So this is set of slides is an example of created content. Now, the next content will include a video. Well, this video is what we call a collected content because, well, I didn't do the content itself. I didn't do the video. I just borrowed it from Khan Academy. So as you can see, this video or this content must also aim to achieve the lesson objective. So in this case, it aims to cover the second learning objective, which is graphing a quadratic function. Okay, and then after that, well, we have another slide. This is to present different terminologies and different parts needed for quadratic function. And then after the content, it will be followed up by activities. So in this example, what are the steps in graphing quadratic functions using table of values? This aims to summarize what we have learned for the content. And then the second open-ended question is, well, identify and discuss the parts. Okay? So Again, to summarize, the content should be relevant in achieving lesson objectives, because if you put a content that is not related or not relevant to the lesson objective, then it will just make your self-paced out-of-class activity somewhat vague, because, well, students, they will look for the reason why they are watching or why they are checking out on that content if it will not be reflected in the activities that will be given after the content. The third indicator is an online activity should access contents best delivered through direct instruction online. Okay, so in a self-paced out-of-class activities, well, a teacher will no longer have a lecture on introducing a concept. Hence, there must be a content that will include direct instruction. So let's go to homework number 3, which includes central angle and intercepted arc. Okay, so since there will no longer be introduction from the teacher, because, well, we are in a pandemic and we really are not sure when are we going to start our classes or how are we going to start our classes. So we must be ready by preparing content that can introduce the topic without us starting it. Okay? So in this example, so central angle and intercepted arc, we have two videos. First is this is an introduction, and then second is or will include examples and then an activity. So if we open this here, okay, so this is a collected content. So I just got it from YouTube. Okay, so this will include an introduction to central angles and intercepted arc. Okay, so as you can see here, well, this video aims to identify what is a central angle and what do we mean by intercepted arcs. Okay? And then after that, since of course in mathematics it will not just end with the introduction of the terms, we have the second video which includes examples. Okay? So if we click this one, so this one is actually the part where central angle is no longer identified because it is already identified in the first video. So this one is the computation part of the topic. Okay, and then after that, after the two videos, so the first is an introduction including terms, the second one includes examples, and then we're going straight to the seat work, in which students can only answer the seat works after they watch the two videos. The fourth indicator is an online activity should arrange tasks carefully to provide meaningful flow of ideas. So to present this indicator, I'm going to again use an example from my online activities in Circle. So we're going to focus on homework 8, measures of chords, tangents, and seconds. So this is an example of a simple flow of task. Okay, so you start first with an introduction and then a video, a content, a website, and then an activity. So as you can see here, first is we have a video. This video will discuss how to measure chords, tangents, and seconds given several corollaries and other concepts. And then after that, well, we also include a website in which, in case they don't want a video, they also have written content. And then after that, once they know what to do, then they're going to answer an activity. So, well, that is an example of a simple arrangement of tasks. So content after content after content, and then after all the contents are done, they're going to answer an activity in which they can only answer this if they really understand the content. However, that is not always the case. some activities are somewhat more complex compared to the first activities because it is based on the complexity of the objective. For example, we're going to this activity. So this is again a self-paced activity for break-even point. So the difference of this activity with homework 8 that I discussed earlier is that um, this activity does not just give you content. You need to discover the content itself, because the main objective here is, if we look at the instructions, this activity will lead to the formula of the break-even point. So a student should determine the break-even point without the formula. So more or less, this is discovery method by nature. Okay, so let's look at this activity more. So first is instructions, and then we're going to have part 1. So for this part 1, well, we have here the questions. Okay, so for part 1, the first is you are given the information. Okay, all the prices needed. Actually, this is for costing. And then the activity requires the students to compute for the total fixed cost and then for the total variable cost. Okay, so the total fixed cost and the total variable cost are the two values needed for students to compute for the break-even point. So before they can compute for the break-even point, they need to know first how to compute for the total fixed cost and for the total variable cost. And then after that, once they identified it, then here, okay, then they need to see the relationship between the variable cost and then the total cost and then the fixed cost, and then get the equation or the relationship between total revenue and then the number of products to be sold. So more or less, this part, the first part or part 1 discuss on how to compute for total variable cost and total fixed cost, but for the second part is more or less it aims to identify the relationship between the variables needed here. Okay, so they're going to answer these activities and then they're going to realize what is the relationship between the two. For example, to get the total cost, they need to realize that it is the variable cost times the number of products plus the total fixed cost. For the total revenue, they need to realize that total revenue is just selling price of each cheesecake times the number of cheesecake to be produced. And then the third part is, well, relationship in mathematics are actually presented in linear equations. So we have here, okay, it presented here a GeoGebra activity in which they will input here the two equations they got from part 2, and then they will form two lines. And then once they form two lines, they will continue to part 4. And then in part 4, they need to realize that there's something in the two lines in part 3 that they need to consider so that they can determine the break-even point. So in general, for this indicator, well, if you're just referring to giving content after content after content and then giving an activity at the end, then that is a simple arrangement of tasks. There's no, it's not a problem to give a simple arrangement of tasks. However, of course, we promote differentiation. So there are some activities in which you need to make it like a discovery method. Okay, so if you want a student to have or to if you want to encourage discovery learning, then you need to arrange the activities or the tasks one by one until they come up with what you want them to discover in the first place. The fifth indicator is an online activity should allow learners to learn at their own pace. So to present this indicator, we're going to use my online activity on statistical treatments for research as an example. So this activity actually aims to discuss how to use MS Excel um, in performing statistical treatment. Okay, so how does this activity exemplifies giving opportunity for learners to learn on their own pace? Okay, so first is a student in an online activity should have an ability to choose what topic he or she wants to learn first, because well, there are some students who are somewhat advanced, then there are some students who really needs to repeat a certain topic many times. Okay, so for example, a student want to start first with introduction to hypothesis testing, the first topic, then you can just click it, and then you have hypothesis testing. Now, if you're done with the hypothesis testing, self-paced is it will give you chance to go back to the content and then maybe choose another topic. Okay, so again, it gives students freedom on what to discuss first. However, you still need to give what is preferred because you're still going to arrange it well in a logical manner. For example, a student is, well, somehow he or she really wants to work on the correlation, and then self-paced learning should give that opportunity for that student to work on correlation. Okay? Now, another thing for self-paced learning is that a student could return to the topic that he or she already covered. For example, you're already done with hypothesis testing, then you still have an option to return to that topic and then, well, cover it again. So that is self-paced learning. You can return to your topics that you already covered and then you can do in advance if you want to, as long as you give students freedom to what topic to do first if they want to return to that topic, and also on how long they want to stay on that topic. But of course, given our situation, then you still need to give a deadline, but it depends on them on how are they going to use the time given to them. The sixth indicator is an online activity differentiates instruction to accommodate meaningful learning. To discuss this indicator, we are going to use the online activities for circles as an example. So we're going straight to homework 4, which will describe inscribed angle and intercepted arc. So as you can see here, it is a self-paced activity in which we have, of course, an introduction, 2 contents, and one homework. So in this case, we give 2 content. However, these 2 content, if we open it, so the first one, well, the first one is a content which discuss inscribed angles, but this is in video form.
An inscribed angle is an angle.
On the other hand, we also have another content which actually will discuss the same concept, which is inscribed angles, but this time it is in website form and it is written. So this is the main concept of differentiated instruction, that we're going to give the same content but using different methods or different mediums. In our example for this activity, for homework 4, is we give 2 different mediums just to discuss a single topic, which is inscribed angles. Well, this is helpful because some students refer to videos and some students refer to reading the content. So, the other thing is, regardless of the medium, either it's video or website, both of them refers to direct method. We can also use different method in discussing inscribed angles. And that is exemplified in this next example. So this time, it also discuss inscribe angles, but this time we're not referring to direct method. We're going to use more or less a discovery method. In this activity, we're going to give students opportunity to discover the concepts themselves. So in this case, we're just going to give them instructions and then follow-up questions, and then at the end, they're going to make their own concepts. So this is what I'm saying about a different method instead of a different medium. So they're not just looking at the content, knowing what to do, and then answer an activity. In this time, they're going to make their own understanding on the concept. So this is for station 1 refers to inscribe angles that intercept the same arc, and then if we take a look at the other activities, it refers to different properties on inscribe angles. So take a look at this station 2, angles inscribed in a semicircle. Again, similar to station 1, it also uses discovery method, and it will lead to the conclusion about the relationship between angles inscribed to a semicircle. So this is a different way on presenting content, but again, it will still lead up to the same activity. So in this case, we have this activity in which they're going to answer just to make sure that they know or the concept that they learned is correct and could be applicable to actual problems. The seventh indicator is an online activity provides immediate feedback on learners' performance. So to discuss this indicator, we're going to use my online activities for business mathematics. Well, this is for the last school year. Okay, so if you use the proper online application, some of them gives you um, an option to have automatic checking and scoring. Well, usually those applications only offer that type of feature if your question has an exact answer. Well, in my case, I'm teaching business mathematics on this activity, so we have an exact answer for this one. So if you take a look at this item, let's say item number 1, then you can edit. So there are a lot of applications that provides automatic checking for questions with exact answers. For example, in this one, there is an exact answer. You can put time question, and then you can also show the correct answer after after they answer the activity. You can have that option. But in my case, what I do is I don't give the correct answer, but I give them the score, so that if they are not satisfied with the score, let's say they see that some items are incorrect, then they can still change it, but without knowing the answer. But again, it depends on the purpose you're doing your online activities. Okay. So another thing for immediate feedback is, well, of course, you cannot have a feedback if you don't have automatic checking and automatic recording, because more or less you can give feedback if, let's say, they're lagging on the activities or they're working on their activities but they have very low scores. Okay, so usually LMS gives options to teachers to have an automatic recording of grades. For example, in this one, so if I choose, so this is for term 2, academic year 2019 to 2020, as you can see here. Okay, so this is my record and I didn't check any of these activities. Those scores are automatically given once they answered or did not answer the activity. So this scoring sheet, well, it could help you in providing feedback to your students, especially in online setup. If we're not going to meet our students, it's very important that we tell them that you know that they're not working on their activity, or you know that their scores are low. Okay. However, regarding immediate feedback, after an activity, usually they already know if they submitted or if they failed or passed an activity. Well, given our situation, I suggest you give them a second chance. Let's say if in case they got a low score, then they have a chance to re-answer it again, because our goal here is not giving our students a low grade, instead giving them opportunity to learn even though they're not going to school. So the problem is, well, I'm giving you examples on immediate feedback if we have exact answers. How about if, let's say, your activities are are write-ups? Well, the problem for this is immediate feedback is actually relative to the task you're given them. For example, I also had a class on research that, well, you cannot use an application to automatically check a research chapter. So again, as teachers, if we're giving activities with, let's say, open-ended in nature, then we should give ourselves more time, because again, immediate feedback is relative to the task. Only questions with exact answers are, let's say, possible to be automatically checked. The eighth indicator is an online activity considers a way to motivate learners to complete it. So motivation is actually based on your students. So in my experience, my students are motivated if they see that they are learning. Hence, it is important to divide your task in smaller chunks. Example is this online activity again for circles. So as you can see, activities are divided into several parts, and then one online activity, let's say this online activity for homework number 8, and then one online activity will only include one video or one website, let's say a content that is easy to digest, and then the activity will cap off with actually a relatively easy assessment. So my students enjoy math if they answering the online quizzes right, and then they can answer it right if they see that it is somehow easy and it is not that too long, because when if they see a lot of requirements given to them, well, it may cause some frustration. Okay, so regarding online quizzes, there are some applications that could make them more motivating. Okay, so in this example, as you can see, this is a quiz, but somehow it's just like an ordinary online quiz. But if given the proper conditions, you can also give assessments that are, let's say, somehow more fun. So example is this one. So this is one of my activities. So this is a term assessment reviewer for research 1. Well, I gave it before the term assessment as a reviewer. So usually this type of applications have live version, but I suggest you consider the practice one or the solo practice, because again, we are referring to self-paced learning because of the some problems live events may the problems that may occur in live events. So in practice, so let's take a look. So in these questions, it's just like a normal assessment with 10 items, because, well, it is a review. And then if you see it in practice, you can see the difference. How can we make a simple assessment more fun? Okay. So as you can see here, it is, well, not just a quiz, but, well, becomes more fun. Okay. So this is This is what I'm saying by making it more motivating. You need to change some of your practice, or maybe you need to adjust your instruction to make it appealing to our students. Now that I presented some of my online activities that exemplifies indicators of a quality self-paced out-of-class activities, I hope I inspired you to face the challenges we teachers may face during this pandemic. Make sure that this new VUCA brought by the pandemic will not limit our capabilities as teachers. Let's reimagine the way we teach. According to Reeves, we can transform VUCA into an environment that is vital, uplifting, conscientious, and authentic. This is how we will contribute as frontliners in the new normal. That's it for our PNU Talks. Please comment your questions and opinions on today's episode. Don't forget to like and share. Till the next time, this is Joma.